It gives me great pleasure to present to you today a solid scholar a scholar with a voracious appetite for learning. You can see we're talking about an engineer. We are talking about, especially the ecology, of geography, and whatever. You're talking about history too. So if someone is saying, if you're a scientist, and just last week, he sent me his most recent publication, highly sophisticated work of scholarship. Okay, Abu Ghana, as I fondly call him. You're welcome on board. You're welcome to MAJMA community. These are the original members of MAJMA, what was nursing the ideas, the concept, thinking about how can we move it forward, how I think people behaving like this, how can we change the direction, how can we rethink it, how can we, over 20 years ago. Alhamdulillah, we are all where we are today. You're welcome, Professor Adebiyi. Can you make your presentation?
Thank you so much for the opportunity and the invitation to get started. The leading online panel conversation being put together by the MAJMA community in Lagos. What I'd like to make a request of is to make me a co-host so that I'm able to share my presentation with the audience.
Okay, that's granted. Okay, you're there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Where are the slides? Yeah, my slide. So thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you, framing agenda for what we should be expecting every single time we come to this forum to have conversation about the development challenges affecting the Nigerian Muslims and what we should be doing to fix them. My goal in this presentation is to use the explorative lens of the situation, the development situations in Nigeria to elicit the current predicament or travails of the Muslim. And the reason why I opted to do this is because currently we do not have a data that specifically focuses on the development situation of Muslims in the country. The data that are collected about development situation in the country are not disaggregated along religious line. However, we can make inference based on our understanding of the situations of things regionally, at the country level, and based on our acquaintance with the lived reality of the Nigerian Muslim. And what I also did was to use the concept of extrapolation based on all of those to make a determination of where the Muslims currently are in Nigeria, be it the northern Muslims or the southern Muslims. One of the first set of data I'm going to be sharing with us is what is known as the data on the multidimensional poverty index in Nigeria. And this data was collected and computed by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. And it revealed that 63%, that is 133 million of Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. And when we talk about multidimensional poverty, we're looking at poverty that is cross-cutting, meaning that they could be poor in terms of
Abudu
food.
Ghana, I just sọ pé ó máa sọ
Hello?
Yorùbá náà. Ah,
Yeah, I will be
òyìnbó yìí ti
combining
pọ̀
both.
òyìnbó yìí ti pọ̀ jù náà. Máa fi tó bá ti
Yes,
débi tó
sir.
ti máa sọ Yorùbá náà kó máa fi sí.
Okay,
It's
sir.
all right.
I'll be code missing. Thank you. So
It's
that
all right.
133 million people may be suffering from food poverty. They may be suffering from lack of adequate access to sanitation. It could also mean that they could be suffering from dearth of access to quality health care and etc. etc. So multidimensional poverty could also be looked upon from the perspective of multiple deprivations. Because if you are deprived at several scales, the meaning is that it may become difficult for you to get out of poverty across generation because you are money poor, you are asset poor, and you are capability poor. And capabilities is one of the ways we can actually get out of poverty. And when you look at this particular data, what it tells us is that majority, based on our own understanding of the existing reality of the Muslim, majority of Muslims fall within the base of those suffering from what is known as multidimensional poverty. The data further revealed that close to around 6 million Nigerians, that is 40% of the population, are poor. And again, when we get to the regional disaggregation of this data, we are going to make a claim that many Muslims fall within the brace of those that are poor in the country. And this is a regional disaggregation of the data. Look at from the north-south dichotomy. 65% of the populace in the north, where the majority of Muslims are poor, meaning that majority of the folks, we can infer based on our understanding of the reality on the ground, that majority of those that are in the north that are poor are Muslims. At the same time, 35% of the population of the people in the southern part of the Muslims are also of the country are also poor. Based on our own existing understanding and a dictator live reality, we can also hypothesize that majority of those in the South that are poor are also of Muslims background. And we can begin to dive deeper into that particular data. So I'm going to leave that right now. Another data that we can also draw some inferences for is the data that focuses on school-age children not attending schools. But this is one of the ways you can determine whether a particular community, either a faith-based community or a non-faith-based community, a particular family, whether a Muslim family or a Christian family, is likely going to get out of the yoke of poverty. Because the way people pass on assets across families, across generations, is the same way that people pass on poverty across generation. And that is why we have the concept of intergenerational poverty. And one of the foundation, the mechanism that actually lead to the issue of intergenerational poverty is the issue of school-age children that are not in school, and they are supposed to be attending school. 29% of those within this age are currently not in school, and 94% of those out of school children are from poor and multidimensionally poor households. And if the initial hypothesis hold true, the majority of the poor in the South and the West, in the South and the northern part of the country, if majority of them are Muslims, we can also draw an inference from this data that majority of the out-of-school children in the northern part of the country and in the southern part of the country are likely to be Muslim. And that is a data we need to think about. There are data that we also need to think about has to do with what we call the literacy data. And the literacy data is very important because in the development arena, there is what literacy situation and the literacy situation in a particular country. We can do the HGI for communities. We can do the HGI, compute the HGI for the Muslim. Again, the data shows that all is not really, really good in the country. Close to 42 million Nigerians are lacking literacy skills. I mean, literacy skill needed for them to live a purposeful and meaningful life and impact their society at a larger scale, that we can conclude that they are. When we also disaggregate the same data by age, when we also disaggregate the same data by region, we can also make some determination that majority of those that are suffering from literacy issues in the country are Muslims. And that's something we need to pay attention to. And this is a map that one of the maps that I drew upon to make this inferential and when you take a look at this map closely, you can possibly on my inferential deduction. And this is another data that also formed the basis of my determination, tentative determination about the situation of literacy in Nigeria. When you look at places like Jigawa, just 25% of the people are considered literate. When you look at places like Gombe, another Muslim-dominated country, state in Nigeria, is just 29% literacy level, meaning that when we look at the population, we can make an hypothetical, an informed guess that most of those that are affected are going to be Muslims. When you come to places like Ekiti, when you look at the literacy rate, it's close to 96%. A majority of those in Ekiti, they are not Muslims. And we know the life condition of the Muslims in Ekiti. Many of them do not have the opportunities that a Christian in Ekiti have. And these are issues that we need to pay attention to when we deal with the Nigerian data, because within the Nigerian data set, we can make inferential deduction about the current developmental situation of Muslims. And this is now getting into the gender analysis of the literacy gaps across regions in Nigeria. When you look at this data, which is quite revealing, majority of the regions that Muslims are the most percentage proportion of the population, the gender gaps in education and literacy is evident. And we know what the situation of Muslim women is in most parts of Nigeria, including in the Southwest, that is considered the most educated part of the country. And what this means is that if we have data that enables us to dive deeper into how this particular data disaggregate along religious lines based on this hypothesis, most likely we are going to be dealing with a stark reality that possibly could assist us to get into what we need to be focusing on as a Muslim community, prioritizing the education of Muslim women, ensuring that they have top-notch education at the university level, up to the level of doctorate, and possibly people becoming professor, people becoming leaders of thought in their chosen professional and career pathways. The other way we can also look at the development situation in Nigeria is to get to some specifics. For example, the issue of food insecurity. It's a big one in the country. And existing data and existing science indicate that those that are suffering from food and nutritional insecurity of all sorts are likely to be suffering, are likely to be mentally retarded, are likely not to be able to fulfill and realize their potentials. Against this data, when disaggregated, part of the country. And we can begin to think about what this actually means and what we need to be thinking about. Now, let's not get to the specifics. Some of the issues that I like us to be thinking about when we come to this forum, and that we need to be thinking about in our various ecosystems. And people that are the participant in this forum today might be thinking about, okay, what actually led us in this situation? And what is our current situation within the body of the developmental challenges affecting Muslims? One of the major issues we are facing as Muslims in Nigeria is identity crisis. Many Nigerian Muslims are dealing with the challenges the identity issues are related to trying to make sense of what is happening to us as Muslims with this highly evolving modern and postmodern reality that we find ourselves. And that is why you are likely to see a Muslim sister that is putting on a hijab and at the same time putting on a miniskirt. It's an issue of identity crisis. And there are many manifestations of this. The other challenge that we are dealing with as Muslims is that we do not have data about our development challenges as Muslims. What we have is a data set that speaks to the challenges affecting us as a country. At the national level, there is no data set that talks about the situation of Nigerian Muslims. At the regional level, we do not have data sets alluding to the situation of the Nigerian Muslim. At the community level, we do not have data sets highlighting the specifics of our problem. At the household scales, we also do not have data sets. And there is no way you can think about addressing development challenges affecting the Nigerian Muslim at the national scale, at the regional scale, at the community scales, at the household scale, without having data about those issues. The other situation that we are faced with as Muslims in Nigeria is what I call the dearth of strategic, coordinated, and evidence-based response to our problems. Many times, when I get involved in conversations about Muslims, folks are always thinking we could do this, we could do that. The reality is that that is not how things are done. In places where they're finding solutions to their development challenges, we need strategic, coordinated, evidence-based response to a problem. And that comes back to the need for us to have data. And that comes back to the need for us to have folks that are trained in the area of strategic planning and solutioning to problems. The other issue we have is the dearth of development-oriented think tanks and institutions. We do not have faith-specific think tanks that are committed to exploring, researching, and framing solutions to a problem. All we have the Madaris. Or we have these Islamic organizations. They do dawah, they do all sorts of things. But we have development-oriented think tanks and institutions, researching our problems and framing solutions to our problem as a community. We do not have any that I'm aware of. Equally, we don't have such institutions training and producing highly resourceful human resource needed for us to be able to find solutions to a problem. And we also do not have such institutions and establishment framing and executing agendas for the Nigerian Muslims. The other thing I like to put on the table as part of our traverse as Nigerian Muslim is the issue related to human capital. We have problem of order utilization and wastage of human capital. There are many occasions that when I have conversations with Muslims that have completed their first degree, their second degree, that is their master's. What are you doing? Some of them will tell me, Ghana, I'm working in an elementary school. And I wonder what this elementary school is actually adding in terms of having such an individual to address, to realize their potential. So we have many human resources that is wasting, and we have many human resources that is underutilized. We also have the question of paucity, of quality, visionary, human resource, people that can actually think through our problems and provide and articulate a visionary pathway to solving that problem. It's massive within the Muslim community. We also have the problem of conscious Muslim in critical ecosystem. When you go around ecosystems of all sorts in the private sector and the public sector, chances are that a Muslim you're going to find holding a critical position does not even understand the basic tenet of his or her deen. And that is not the situations with the Christians you're going to find in critical ecosystem. I've had many conversations one-on-one with the president of African Development Bank in person of Dr. Adebiyi. And in some of these private conversations in the community of development thinkers, Additional would introduce himself as a pastor, as a person that is of a commitment to his faith obligation. And there are several other Christians from Nigeria that I've met at international forums that introduce themselves as pastors. How many such Muslims do we have in critical ecosystems that are conscious Muslims? We have apostasy in this area. We also have paucity of conscious Muslims in leadership position, in advocacy spaces, and in media organization, and etc., etc. And in the areas of education, we are also lagging behind. So what should we be doing? And that is setting an agenda for this platform, another related platform. We need to retool. And retooling means, I'm going to be talking about retooling in depth as we proceed in the course of this presentation. And then we need to be intentional about wanting to solve a problem. Intentionality is a big part of what we need to do. And we need to be visionary. That is, plan in a visionary way to solve a problem and strategically implement a plan in order for us to get out of a predicament. And we need to embrace development aware solutioning think tanks and spaces. We need to create development aware solutioning think tanks and spaces. And that is why I'm proud to be associated with this initiative. Many Muslim organizations will come up with this. We want to start a Dawah group, we want to start another group. But many of these groups, they are not attending to the basic things that people need to even be a functional and a good Muslim. We need to pay attention to that. So what do we do? How to achieve addressing our challenges? We need to plan where we desire to be. That is, in all Muslim ecosystem, we need to have a planning process that assists us to articulate what we desire to be and where we desire to be. People talk about this. When they do during the month of Ramadan, we are going to talk about spiritual improvement. Do we have a plan for individual improvement? Things need to be done according to plans. In addition to that, we need to be planning how we intend to be where we intend to be. That is, it's not enough to come up with a vision. It's not enough to roadmap where we desire to be. The vision must also be accompanied by strategic action step towards the implementation of a plan. And we need to evaluate and review our plans. Many Muslim organizations and many Muslim society, they do not have an elaborate plan. When I'm talking a plan, I'm not talking about a plan that the leader of a group sits down to write. I've been part of many Muslim ecosystems and discussional spaces. And what I come to realize is that the way we plan explains why we are where we are. Because I've also been part of planning process. For example, in the United States, I've led planning processes that led to the revitalization of labor. I've been part of the planning processes at the state level. And when we get into this practicing, into this process, there is a lot of brain power. There is a lot of data. There is a lot of truth that we invest. And there is a lot of time and resources that we invest to develop plan. In many of the conversation I've been part of, that focuses on trying to come up with a roadmap for Nigerian Muslims. What I see is people coming to discussion. No data, no special plans on how to go about the planning. And we come up with something on a piece of paper, and at the end of the day, the situation remains where it is. And why is it important for us to plan? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the master planner. It doesn't need a plan, but He created a plan for the earth and everything thereof. He planned everything, and He wrote down everything. And that is why, that is the insight we get from Surah Al-Hadid, verse 22. No misfortune on earth or in your soul, but it's recorded in a plan, will bring into existence. Allah is telling us about this. When you read this verse of the Quran, we need to learn how to internalize it. Allah planned. He doesn't need a plan. He wrote down His plan. He doesn't need to write it down. And the purpose of doing this is to tell us how to live a life as Muslim, as an ummah. And in another surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Anfal, verse 30, Allah says, but the plan Allah plans. Allah recognizes that people do plan, but Allah also has His plan. But Allah is the best of all planners. What do we think about this? And in another verse of the Quran, Surah Al-Qamar, it is said, verily all things have we created in planned proportion and measure. And that is another attestation to the impurity of planning. And when we think through the stories of the prophets told in the Quran, do we think about it and the impurity for these, for planning, how to solve our development issues? And in
Abdul-J,
case in point,
Professor Adebiyi, this is an interesting presentation. Oya bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí sọ Yorùbá láti sìn lọ. Òyìnbó yìí ti.
Yeah. Okay, I'll be speaking.
Òyìnbó yìí ti
Yeah, I'll be
pọ̀ jù. Ṣé Michigan ló wà ní Nàìjíríà lélẹ́yìí now? Ó dẹ̀ rọra.
Okay, sir. Yeah, so I'm about to round up my presentation.
Abdul-J, ó máa dá wákà gan pàápàá now. Sọ Yorùbá kó dá wákà
Okay, sir,
káwọn.
inshallah. Okay. So in the case of Sayyidina Musa, alayhi salatu wassalam, he wanted to do a dawah. There was an obligation, a responsibility given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He did an assessment of his situation, and he found a solution to this gap he identified in his inability, in his capability to do the job successfully and effectively. And he sought for the resources he needed to fix his problem. This is another illustration of the impurity of planning to succeed and to be successful. And what did he do? He said, oh, my Lord, expand my chest, because he knew that it was having a gap. He did a gap analysis, and he developed a plan to address it. He said, it's my task. Remove the impediment from my speech so that they may understand what I say, and give me a minister. He looked for the required resources. And this is one of the areas that we need to begin to reflect on how we do things in Muslim ecosystem. Again, I've been part of many organizations in Nigeria. There are certain organizations, you run into trouble for suggesting what to do. You run into trouble by telling the leaders that this doesn't appear to be a good way to solve this problem. I found myself in a messy situation in places that I'm familiar with, whereby the leaders might be thinking that you are trying to hijack an organization from them. And we also had cases during the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the companions of the Prophet were asking the Prophet, was this a revelation or your understanding of the situation? And the Prophet, on some occasions, would tell them that was a revelation. On some occasions, the Prophet would tell them that was my own thinking. And the companions of the Prophet would tell the Prophet, we don't think that is going to work. We need to try another alternative. And the Prophet will embrace the alternative. And there was a particular case in point. The Prophet was walking by a farm, and he met some people doing what we call in the modern palace, cross-pollination. And the Prophet gave them an opinion that why can't you leave that particular plant to pollinate itself? And the Prophet left, and he did exactly what the Prophet did. The following year, The Prophet went by the same farm and he realized the harvest was drastically affected. And he said, what happened? And they said to the Prophet, you told us to stop cross-pollinating a plant. And the Prophet said, I never gave you a doctrinal injunction. I offered an opinion. The matters of the life, you know better than I do, that you should do what you used to do because you have acquired the knowledge and the expertise in that particular ecosystem. That was the Prophet. Who else is better than the Prophet as a Muslim? So the ability to identify our gaps as Muslim leaders, either in our madaris, in our Islamic organizations, is one of the things that we need to square up with in order for us to create a supportive environment that form the basis of
Wonderful,
development, of
wonderful
successful
presentation.
development plan.
Ó yẹ kí n ti wé
And it's not,
láwàní wá bí ilé ní kó lè mọ̀ pé ìjókòó tá ti máa sọ Yorùbá àti òyìnbó ni. You see, tá a bá wà ní àárín ara wa nínú yunifásitì, language wa ni ò ń sọ yìí. Ṣé o mọ̀ pé lórí platform yìí àwọn màmá wa kan wà níbí, àwọn bàbá wa kan wà níbí, àwọn àfáà wa oríṣiríṣi wà níbí tí wọ́n jẹ́ onímọ̀ tó jẹ́ wọ́n tiẹ̀ fẹ́ gbọ́, wọ́n ti gbádùn òyìnbó yẹn gan. So tó bá ti conclude díẹ̀ bóyá láàrin ìṣẹ́jú kan sí méjì kó jẹ́ ká gbọ́.
yes,
Because
sir.
you see, sórí àwọn data yìí, information tó wà nínú data yìí n tó lè jẹ́ ká mọ bí tá a wà àti bí nǹkan ṣe ti ṣe wá tó ni. Àwọn ìmáàmù wa náà nídìí láti mọ ohun tó jọ ń ṣe wá. Àwọn àfáà wa tó wà nílé kéwú náà ok, àwọn èèyàn ti attack mi o. Wọ́n ní professor yẹn communicate pé kí n filẹ̀. So it's okay, carry on.
So I'm about to round up. Then the other thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know, that we need to learn from the Quran, is that Allah has not chosen people with the right quality.
I think this is appreciated. Many individuals are actually commenting that they are finding
the crisis of humanity.
So carry on.
Allah's selection of prophet is another thing that we need to think about. And this is what I've learned in Western society. They look for the right people with the right capability to get the job done. And that is exactly the lesson Allah wants us to learn from his choices of the prophet. And he said it in the Quran. And remember a servant, Ibrahim, Isaac, Jacob. They were men of strength and insight. Strength is what we call in modern parlance, human capability. They had top-notch human capability. They had insight, the wisdom to get the job done. And that is something that we need to reflect upon. Continues. We truly chose them for the honor of proclaiming the hereafter. That is their responsibility. And in our sight, they are truly among the chosen and the finest. Meaning that Allah used the finest, the best of the best to get the job done. If we need to overcome our travails as Muslims, we need to produce the best of the best. Not only produce the best of the best, we need to use the best of the best to find solutions to interrogate our problems and to implement the solution to our problem. That's another thing we can learn from the Quran. And how do we go about this? There is an instruction from Sayyidina Umar. And Umar told us, radiallahu anhu, he said, for your worldly affairs, construct your plans based on the assumption that you will live forever. And that's a planning principle, a development principle that we need to internalize across different ecosystems as Muslims. So meaning that we need to be super ambitious about our plans, plan in a way as if we are going to live forever. And at the same time, we need to work for the year after, as if the year after is tomorrow, meaning that we need to create a program. Umar said it specifically. He said, create programs for your year after. And the programs we are going to create for a year after is part of the development agenda that Muslims need to put into consideration. And that is why as Muslims, we need to go back to our tradition, learn and internalize what we need to be doing better, planning for our future and planning based on development aware processes. And it is here that I'm going to stop my contribution for today, and hopefully we can get more to this during the open discussion section. Thank you once again for listening, and apologies for going beyond 20 minutes. That was